Welcome back. This is the second in a six-part series to help you on your journey with the Small Business Data Analysis Roadmap. My name is Rob Fernango, founder and owner of F1 Analytics, and I help energetic business people organize and streamline their critical processes to save time and achieve more success without having to become an expert analyst or coder. That's why I developed the Small Business Data Analysis Roadmap to help you turn your business into a high-performance money machine in 6 simple steps. If you haven't read my report, 6 Simple Steps to Turn Your Business into a High-Performance Money Machine, then be sure to get over to our website and download the report. The link is in the description section below. By signing up, you'll get my 36-page Small Business Data Analysis Roadmap absolutely free. You'll also get the tools shown in this video series for free so you can use them with the report and start making changes that impact your work life immediately. Now let's go ahead and get into it. In the last video, we explored the Process Map Worksheet as a tool to help you map out your business processes in clear details so that you have documentation that will help yourself and potentially others understand how your business works. In step 2, you want to develop a manageable list of key performance indicators, or KPIs, to assess and monitor your business processes when making improvements. Knowing what you're trying to improve and having a way to measure whether those improvements are working is critical to making improvements quickly and without a lot of waste. Additionally, while it's tempting to think that your sales revenue or sales volume will tell you if things are working, that is not always going to be the case. You might be able to make changes in your processes that save time and money internally without making any difference in your sales revenue. So your profits would increase, but sales would remain the same. Because of this, it's really important to let your process maps and your goals and outcomes for each business process help guide your selection of KPIs so that you can identify the most meaningful metrics to improve your efficiency. To help you organize this information, I've developed an Excel workbook called the KPI List Worksheet, or KLW. This workbook will allow you to develop a KPI list for up to 20 different business processes. There's also a paper version of the workbook that you will receive with the download, but we're going to focus on the Excel workbook version in this video. There are 3 worksheets in the workbook: instructions, the KLW template, and terms and conditions. The instructions worksheet provides you with written instructions on how to set up the workbook for your business processes. And this process for setting up the KPI list worksheet is the same as we've used for the process map worksheet in the last video. You're going to begin by listing each business process in the process list table in the instruction worksheet. Now, the process name should be 31 characters or less so that the links in the workbook will work. If you need more than 10 processes, you can always unprotect the worksheet by going to Home, Format, Unprotect Worksheet, and then you can click on the plus sign on the left and expand out this list, and you can get from 10 and it goes up to 20 different processes. We're not going to need that many for this example. If you need to reprotect the worksheet, then you can go back up under Home, Format, Protect Sheet, and when it asks for a password, you can just click on OK, and now it'll be protected without a password. So to follow along with our last example, if we wanted to add a couple of processes here, so for example, say a sales process or a production process or a product development process, we could list these out. And now we've got links over here, but we need to create the worksheets to go along with these links. So to create a worksheet, you're going to come down here to the KLW template, and we need to make 3 copies of this worksheet in order to accommodate our 3 processes listed here. So we'll just do this once to show you an example of it. You're going to right-click on the worksheet name, the tab down here at the bottom, click on Move or Copy, and then select the KLW template because we want to put a copy before this KLW template worksheet. And then we're going to click on Create a Copy and click on OK. Now you'll see that you've got a KLW template 2 worksheet down here, and you can double click on that and we'll change the name to Sales for our sales process that we listed first in the process list here. So now that we've got the same name here that we have in the process list, when you click on this worksheet link, it'll go to that worksheet, and then you can click on the instructions link to get back to the instructions if you need. Okay, great. I'll let you go ahead and create the processes that you need to for your own worksheets. And we'll go ahead and move into looking at developing the KPI list for some of these processes. Okay, so I've already completed one of these in our sample workbook. And so I'm going to bring that up so that you can see what we have in the sample workbook here. So on our sales worksheet, we have three areas that need to be filled out. The first is the header, which includes the business process and a date, so you know when your documentation was created. The second is to create a list of process goals and outcomes that can be used. And then the third component is the KPI data table, in which you're going to include all the information about the key performance indicators that you're looking at and potentially using for this business process. Now, in the last video, we created a process map for our sales process. And this was just a sample process map. It may be different from the process in your sales process for your business. This is just one example that we put together. And we want to take a look at that again, just because this is going to be what we use to drive our KPI selection process. In the last video, when we created this process map, we had a sales process that included lead generation, qualifying prospects, nurturing them through the sales funnel, and then eventually closing the sales. If you need to review the process map worksheet, sample workbook that was provided with the last video, you can for additional details. But from this process map and from our thoughts about the sales process that we have from our previous video, I went through and developed several process goals and outcomes that we might want to look at for this system. And for the sales process, we started off with a process goal of saying we want to identify qualified leads well enough that we can minimize how many fall out of the sales funnel. So essentially what we're saying is we want to be able to qualify our leads so that when we put them into the sales funnel, we're getting as many converted into sales as we possibly can. Our second goal is to better determine whether those qualified leads are good fits during the initial contact. We've got our initial contact period in which our sales associates are going to go through the initial contact information and sales script, and they're going to look at the fit of the client and determine, are they really a good fit for our product or service or not? And if they're not, then we're going to let them fall out of the funnel. We're going to make sure that they understand it's not going to be a good fit for them, and we're not going to waste their time or our time or anybody's money. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are able to determine if those qualified leads are a good fit or not as accurately as possible. Obviously, we want to close as many sales as possible as another goal. And then I included a few specific goals here, which are to increase the number of sales by 10% year over year, as well as increasing sales revenue 15% year over year. The outcomes that we're looking at very specifically, obviously, are going to be our sales volume and our sales revenue. The other potential metrics that we'll have that we look at during this process are going to be related to the process itself and may not necessarily be outcome specific. Additionally, there could be other specific goals and outcomes depending on your sales process, but this gives us a good start to show how to fill out the KPI list worksheet. Now remember, to develop the KPI list, you want your KPIs to have a couple of specific characteristics. We want them to be connected and relevant to business goals. We want them to be simple to understand. We want them to be things that we have control of. And then we want them to be actionable, meaning that when a metric changes in a certain direction, we want to know what we can do to either try to get it to go back in the other direction or to continue pushing it in the direction that it's moving. For each KPI identified, we need to include several pieces of information based on the 4 characteristics of good KPIs. Obviously, we need to have a name for the KPI. We also need to know about its direction. We need to know whether we want performance tied to this KPI to go up or go down. For example, we typically want conversion rates to increase, meaning that more of our prospects are purchasing products. The direction field includes a drop-down menu with arrows pointing up and down that show you the selection to reflect increasing or decreasing rates. In this case, if we look at our first KPI for qualified lead conversion rates, because it's a conversion metric, we want this to go up. In the calculation field, this is a space where you can write out how the KPI gets calculated. This can be used as a reference when you actually need to calculate the KPI and to make sure that you always know what this KPI is measuring. In this case, we've got a qualified lead conversion rate. To measure that, we're going to look at the number of converted leads divided by the number of qualified leads and multiply it by 100 to get a percentage. In the next field, interpretation, this field includes a plain language description of what the KPI is measuring. So in this case, we're measuring our conversion ability from the initial contact to the end of the process. If we look back at our process map, we're talking about taking qualified leads and putting them into our sales funnel for making first contact through our nurturing funnel, overcoming objections, and then ultimately to closing the sale. And so what we want to do is we want to know whether or not our process can convert those leads into sales. So this measure is going to look at the overall ability for us to convert qualified leads into sales. The next set of measures, and there are 10 of them, are all related, and they represent the specific actions that we want to take when a KPI changes. AOI stands for Action on Increase. So AOI 1 through AOI 5 represent spaces for up to 5 specific actions to take if the KPI increases. Similarly, we have 5 more metrics labeled AOD, which stands for Action on Decrease. So AOD 1 through AOD 5 represent spaces for up to 5 specific actions to take if our KPI decreases. Now, in this sample, I have filled out the AOI fields, or Action on Increase fields, for the KPIs that we want to see increase. Recall, if we're looking here at our qualified lead conversion rate, we want to see it increase. So if it increases, I've included actions on increase. You don't really need to do this all the time. If we want the KPI to increase, and it does, we tend to assume that our process improvements have worked. I've included these potential actions that could be taken in order to better understand why the KPI increased, since this is a complex process. So for example, has the KPI reached a target rate, if one exists, if we've defined one? Are there differences between our prospect profile and those who are actually qualified? Do the leads that do not convert provide feedback about what could have been done differently? Do we need to make any further updates to continue improving? It's always good to try to understand why a KPI changed, even if it's improving, since this can confirm your understanding of your business processes and environment, but it can also provide you with new insights about the factors that are driving your KPIs if they don't align with your current understanding. It's really most important that you include actions to take if a KPI changes in directions that you don't want them to go in. So for the sales KPIs we want to see increases. So if they decrease, it's really important that we know what actions we're going to take to correct the issue. So in this case, again, we're looking at the qualified lead conversion rate. And so we've got 5 actions on decrease to include here. The first being identifying whether or not there are differences between qualified leads in the previous period and the current period. So if your qualifying decision algorithm wasn't changed, you want to make sure that you were still qualifying the same kinds of people. If there was a difference, then you could look at your prospect data to see if the prospect pool had changed, or you could follow up with your sales team to understand why different kinds of leads were being qualified. You could then assess differences between the leads determined not to fit during the initial contact, between the current period and the last period. And this will let you determine whether the qualified leads were possibly being treated differently than before, and whether the sales associates might need additional training to ensure that they're being consistent in their approach. Along with that action in AOD2, looking at the sales staff, we could ask the general question, have sales staff experience any change. If your sales staff are newer or less experienced than they used to be, they might not be performing at the highest level and they might need additional training. We could also ask, has there been a shift or a disruption in the market? Was there something outside of your control in the marketplace that could have changed this KPI? Or was there a new competitor? Was there a new technology introduced? Or were there economic changes like inflation that reduced the likelihood of leads converting? Similarly, you could ask whether or not your customer reviews or satisfaction scores have declined. Could this be a reason for your reduced conversions? Finally, you may want to revert to a previous prospect profile and process for qualifying your leads. This could be done to see if undoing changes that were implemented might improve the process, improve the performance measure of your KPI, and bring it back to its initial level. This would really only be necessary if changes that had been made just prior to the KPI decreasing, and if there were no other obvious reasons why the KPI would have declined. For each KPI identified as relevant to your process and goals, you want to go through this exercise. It's going to help you think through what the KPI is for and why you're measuring it. It will also help you think about what you should do when the KPI increases or decreases so that you can respond to those changes quickly and with confidence. We see that there's a couple of other KPIs that have been included in this list. For example, the percentage of qualified leads that fit. Again, this is going back to our original process map here. We have a qualified lead. We make first contact with that, and we want to know how many of them fit, what proportion of them are fitting based on the contact with our sales associate. So this would be based on the percentage of leads that ended up entering our nurturing funnel. So they were defined as having fit, and then dividing that by the total number of qualified leads. And this is really just going to get to our plain language interpretation is this is a measure of accuracy of our lead generation process for identifying future clients. And then again, our action, if it increases, and we want this measure to increase, right? We want this measure to go up as high as possible. So our actions on increase are pretty much the same as they were for our conversion rates. And our actions on decrease are the really important ones. So if we see that this number goes down, we may want to know, is there a difference in the qualified leads in this period versus the previous period? If there are differences in the leads who fit between the previous period and this period, again, has the sales staff experienced a change in their level of training or competency? And then again, if we need to, we can always revert back to the previous qualifying decision. Now, these actions are very similar across these two measures, and that's not always going to be the case. But again, it's just an exercise for you to go through and think about this measure and think about why would this go down and what are the things that we want to check to make sure that we can do something if this measure moves in the direction that we don't want it to move in. Again, we have a nurturing conversion rate that's listed in here. We still could look at sales volumes and sales revenue, as well as sales volume year over year and sales revenue year over year. Now, I've included all of these metrics in the KPI list, and you can look at them to see sort of how the KPIs were selected and determined. And then think about what the KPIs would be for your business processes that you're trying to map out. I've also included KPI examples for the production process and the product development process, so you can review them on your own. In the production process, we're really focusing on the QA process, particularly the defect rate and shooting for less than one defect in 1,000 products. We're also focused on the throughput time, or reducing the time spent during the production process from the time an order is entered to the time that we're done with producing it. We've also got to focus on having inventory on hand. So, for example, having production runs without the procurement step of the process. We want to make sure that we have as few production runs where we have to start by ordering product because we don't have it there. And then also making sure that the vendor product that we receive is not defective. So we look at the vendor rejection rate, or the number of units rejected from a vendor divided by the number that are tested, so that we get a sense of how many units are being rejected. In the product development process, then, we have a focus on our overall process and making sure that we have higher quality ideas that are going into the pipeline. So we want the percentage of ideas that get launched to be as high as possible, so that we're not spending time on ideas that aren't good enough to be launched and be put forward into production. We also want to reduce the overall costs of launching a product. And this is the total cost of product development divided by the number of products that actually get launched. But then we're also going to separate out and focus on reducing sunk costs per product launch, or the costs of unlaunched products that then get spread out across those products that are launched. We want those two cost metrics to be minimized. Then we look at our entire product development process, and we want to increase the percentage of ideas that make it through each of the major phases in the process, so that we can see where we're cutting the biggest number of ideas and determine whether we're making good decisions or bad decisions, and whether or not the ideas that get to each phase are of poor quality, or if we can figure out a way to weed out the ideas that we don't want to have. So for each KPI, then, I've also included potential actions to take if the KPI moves in a direction that we don't want it to change in. So if it's a metric that's supposed to go up, I include actions on decrease. And if it's a metric that's supposed to go down, I've included actions on increase, so that you can see what some potential actions would be there. And after going through this video and taking a look at some of these KPIs and reviewing this sample workbook, you're going to be ready to take this process map and begin compiling lists of KPIs to measure your mission critical activities, or even just measure those areas where you already know you need help. So you're going to be able to develop a clear list of well-defined KPIs and action plans that are going to help you make more confident decisions quickly, so that you can react to the changing environment of your business. Now, in part 3 of this series, we're going to take a look at your hidden superpowers in the data that you already have available to use in making your business more efficient and powerful. Remember, if you haven't already read the 6 simple steps to turn your business into a high-performance money machine, be sure to click the link in the description section below to get my 36-page small business data analysis roadmap and all of the tools shown in this video series absolutely free, so you can get started immediately. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.